Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sanhedrin Daf Nun Aleph. We're going to get started with this braita. What we're going to deal with for today basically is this braita. The braita we started yesterday about the bat kohen. We're going to have 7 different halachot, and then we're going to go into 5 of them. Okay, we're going to go into 5 of those lines. With most of them, we're going to try to figure out, because if you remember, I'll remind you though, the braita basically suggests a classic midrash halacha. It says this is the halacha, then it says maybe not, maybe something else. We're going to go into why did they think that? Maybe something else, right? You might have thought even some of them seem a bit out there. So that's mostly what we're going to do. And then there's this last line of the braita, which we haven't gotten to yet, which makes absolutely no sense. And we're going to spend a long time. That's the hard part of today's daf, trying to figure out this opinion of Rabbi Eliezer and what on earth he's talking about. So, and it's going to go back again to the machlokot between Rabbi Yishmael and the rabbis, which remember, we weren't sure which comes first, the chicken or the egg, but which are affected by, it's the main differences. We're going to skip the midiach and nidach today, but we're going to deal with the 2 machlokot of what's the order, skila, streifa, hereg, v'chenek, or skila and streifa switch and hereg and chenek switch, and what is the deen of a bat kohen, who the pasuk where she gets streifa, is it specifically when she's married only? That's the rabbis, not betrothed, because betrothed she gets skila, like every betrothed woman, which is more severe, or Rabbi Shimon, who holds she gets streifa in both cases because he views streifa as more strict and therefore thinks that the strict law is strict across the board, both when she's betrothed, both when she's not. And surprise, surprise, we're going to learn there's a third approach here, and that's going to be Rabbi Yishmael. So hold off for that. We will get there soon. So let's start with our braita and let's go through line by line. Even though we started it already, I'm going to quickly go back. The first, maybe I'll just summarize outside the first few so we don't waste too much, to spend too much. I wouldn't say waste, it's never a waste, but we want to get through everything today. So we start off with number 1, thinking maybe it's Chilul Shabbat also because it says Ki Techel. And then they say, oh no, it says Snut, it's just Snut. That was number 1. Then we said maybe even a non-married woman. And then we said, oh, we learn it Avia Gzera Shava from the Nara Amurasa, who's already betrothed. And therefore here also she must be already betrothed or married, right? Again, there's the debate about which one it is, but okay, that's the second. The third is maybe when it says aviha, maybe it's just her father if she has relations with she gets burned and not any other person. To which they said no, because the aviha, right? Said no, when it says himechalelet, that includes everybody. Okay, then we get to nara v'hi arusa. Okay, now, this, by the way, seems to imply, that was the last thing we did, and this actually we're not going to deal with today, so we'll just finish it and leave it. But a na'ara who's arusa is for sure included. Okay, now that obviously follows Rabbi Shimon's opinion, because Rabbi Shimon thinks na'ara mu'arsa, this doesn't, right? Remember, the rabbis don't think it's arusa. So arusa is obvious, but what about a bogeret? What if she's even old? What if, and less connected with her father? To which they say, bat kohen mikol makom in any case. Okay, we still have 3 left. So now this is where we start. Bat kohen, the last 2 words of nun amud bet. Eli ela sheniset lekohen. This only sounds like, and the Gemara is going to ask, why did you think it sounds this way? Okay, because it doesn't really sound that way. But maybe we only mean a bat kohen who's actually married to a kohen. And what if she's niece? And then it's a real humiliation to her father because she's married to a. I don't know. I don't know why they would think that. We're going to get to the Gemara. What the Gemara is going to say why we would think that. How about if she's married and you say Levi Israel? Okay, what if she's married to a regular Jew or Likuti lechalal mamzer linatin? Now all those people have problems with their yichus, and if a woman is to marry one of the following kuti halal mamzer or natin, she ends up not being. She has a few things that happen to her. A bat kohen normally, when she's married to someone who's not a kohen, she can't eat truma anymore. But if she gets divorced or widowed, she can go back to eating truma in her father's house. Also, she can marry another kohen after that. But as long as she's not divorced. If she's divorced, it's a problem. But if she marries at first a kuti, a halal, a mamzer, and a teen who have problems with the yuchus. Now, kuti, mamzer, and a teen, you're not allowed to marry at all, really, if you're a regular, even an Israeli, can't marry. A halal, a bat kohen can marry a halal. There's no isur for her to do that. But if she does, any of these people she marries, she can no longer eat truma, even if she gets divorced or widowed. And if she's widowed, she can't marry a kohen. So how do you know that even a bat kohen like that right, because you think about it, she loses everything else of her status of a bat kohen. The only thing that's left is streifa. So you might have thought maybe not. Talmud lomar ubat ish kohen. Now the pasuk is strange. She's the daughter of a man who's a kohen. Why don't you just say bat kohen, right? We always call them a bat kohen. We don't call them a bat ish kohen. Why does the pasuk say bat ish kohen? Alpha pisha ena kohenet he besreifa. Alpha pisha ena kohenet. Period. What it's trying to say is, even if she doesn't have any of the other rules of being from a kohen family, because she either is married to someone right now who basically removes her, like myself. I'm a bat kohen. I'm married to a Yisrael, so I really have no right. This is the only relevance for me. The fact that I'm a bat kohen, the only relevance is that if I sleep with somebody else, I would get burned. Okay, very pleasant. And we don't thankfully have a court, and I wouldn't likely do that. So in any case, that's the only thing left. And that's what they're pointing out here. And the reason is because it says the daughter of a man who's a kohen. No matter what, you're still the daughter of a man who's a kohen. Whether you've opted out by marrying someone who's kind of taking you out of that, you still happen to be the daughter of a kohen. Okay, next. He b'sreifa ve'en bo'ala b'sreifa. He b'sreifa ve'en somameha b'sreifa. She gets burned, but as opposed to a normal adultery case where both get the same punishment. Or, right, even whether it's chenek for the regular or a betrothed woman. Someone sleeps with a betrothed woman, he gets stoned and she gets stoned. But in this case, we have a unique exception. Why do we have a unique exception? Very obviously, because she's disgracing her father. Now, you might say he also is, but it's not his father, right? He doesn't have that responsibility of her father. Maybe he has a responsibility toward her. And he does get the death penalty. Let's be clear here. He gets the death penalty, he gets killed anyway. He just doesn't get the shreifa death penalty. Okay? So she gets shreifa and he'll get chenek or skila, right? Depending on whether she's betrothed or not. He b'shreifa ve'en zomameh b'shreifa. Now she's going to get burned, but if edim zomim come, we learned this already. It says there they're going to get the punishment that they wanted to do la'achi, to the brother, right? To their brother, meaning to the man, if it is a man and a woman, in one action that they testified against both, and they're each going to get a different penalty, like in this case, then they're going to get the penalty for him and not for her. So they're also going to get chenek or skila, depending on the situation. Here's that last line, which we're not going to even try to explain at this point, which is Rabbi Eliezer Omer, et avia b'sreifa ve'et chamia b'skila. Okay, if it's her father, it's sreifa. If it's her father-in-law, it's skila. We don't know what this means. We're going to leave it aside. Okay, now we start with all the Amar Mars. Amar Mar means we're going back to, okay, we had a very long braita, like I said, 7 different halachot. We're going to go back to 5 of them and go in depth. Amar Mar, Yachol afilu chilila Shabbat. So we're going to start with the chilul Shabbat. Chilila Shabbat, but skilahi. I don't understand. If she desecrates Shabbat, she gets stoned. Now we're going to say she gets sreifa. That's a little weird. Amar Rabba, Hamani Rabbi Shimon here. Oh, says, this is obviously, this braita goes like Rabbi Shimon. And by the way, it matches Rabbi Shimon also with the Arusa. Remember, we said the obvious case is Arusa, which is Rabbi Shimon, not the rabbis. The rabbis don't even think Arusa is in this pasuk. So it must be Rabbi Shimon who thinks that Sreifa, Damar Sreifa Chamura. And therefore, the thought was, again, this is just what we call Havamina. It's just a hypothesis. It was a suggestion. You might have thought she might get Sreifa, which is more severe than Skila. Okay, now we have, so that was number 1, to understand why you would even, what it would even mean. It doesn't seem to mean anything because it's less, but no, it would actually be more because it's Rabbi Shimon. But now they have to understand, why would you have even thought this? There's a favorite line of the Gemara. It comes up in a lot of places. We might think that we're more strict with Kohanim in general about other things besides the things that the Kohanim are commanded. Kohanim have all sorts of extra commandments, right? They can't be pure to people, all sorts of things about a Kohen. Because they have extra mitzvot, maybe we're stringent with them about other things as well. And therefore, you might have thought, since they have extra mitzvot, so maybe the bat kohen tidon b'sreifa. Kamash malan. So you might have thought maybe she gets a harsher punishment when she's mechalel Shabbat. Therefore, they had to teach you no. But the Gemara asks a question. It's a great question and an even better answer. Okay, sometimes the answers aren't so great. This is an answer that you really have to ponder. Maishna minedide. Wait, this doesn't make any sense. What was our suggestion? Because Kohanim have all sorts of extra commandments, we're going to be strict by the daughter of a Kohen when she's Mechalel Shabbat. What about a male Kohen when he's Mechalel Shabbat? Why would you distinguish, right? It wouldn't make any sense. First of all the extra mitzvot are for the men, not the women. So Why would you say because we're stricter with the men, we're going to give her a harsher punishment if she's Mechalel Shabbat and not him? To which they answer. Here's the fabulous answer. I always say the questions are better than the answers. This is a great answer. Sal kadat hachamina, ihud ishtari le Shabbat legabe avodah. He already has the ability to be Mechalel Shabbat in many situations, because anytime he's in the temple, we're Mechalel Shabbat for Korban Tamid, right? We do all sorts of things on Shabbat that are against what the Torah is, right? Against Shabbat laws, because avodah doche Shabbat. Remember, the avodah overrides Shabbat. So because they're Mechalel Shabbat, he, right, therefore, okay, he, kevan de lo ishtar Shabbat legaba, ematidon b'streifa. We might say that, well, theoretically, we should treat them both more harshly, because Kohanim have a higher standard, and therefore, when they're Mechalel Shabbat, they should get streifa. But since he already desecrates Shabbat in a permitted way, now you have to fill in the blank. You could view it as Shabbat for him is not, like desecrating Shabbat for him is not the same level. Because, okay, and you think about doctors, you think about soldiers, you think about all these people who are Mechalel Shabbat, right? My kids walk around with phones on Shabbat, okay, because they just have to. And it changes Shabbat for them, really. Like it's weird, and some of them, when they finished the army, it was like this, wow, I don't have to carry around a phone on Shabbat anymore, and it's just a whole different thing when you're used to being Mechalel Shabbat. So for them, it's not, and then the question is what? It's not so severe to actually really desecrate Shabbat for them. Now, obviously, they're still going to get the death penalty, but it's not going to have that higher level, but she doesn't have that because she's not Mechalel Shabbat ever. Anyway, it's a really interesting thing to think about. I think there's different directions you could come at it with, like what exactly does it mean? Is it Shabbat? Is it them? Is it, anyway, I'm going to leave that for you to think about. Yachol afilu pnuya. There's a few interesting things. One is here, and there's another one at the end of the daf that I think you're going to walk out of class and say, wow, I got to really give some more thought to these issues. And the last one, at least, Alana Stein-Hain is going to help you out because she's got a whole shiur on it. So, okay. Yachol afilu pnuya. So now we're back to the second one. You might have thought even if she's not married. Ha, liznot ktiv, but it says liznot. Liznot in the Torah generally means a woman who's married, who sleeps with another man. Kid Rabbi Eliezer. So they say, this line matches Rabbi Eliezer, not to be confused with Rabbi Eliezer, who appears at the end of the Mishnah. That's a different person. No, they have similar names, but panoi habala pnuya shelo l'shum ishut asa azona. Rabbi Eliezer has a unique opinion. He says that when it says znut in the Torah, okay, like for example, a kohen can't marry a zonah. What is a zonah according to Rabbi Eliezer? It's even an unmarried person, an unmarried man who sleeps with an unmarried woman, if not for the purposes of marriage, he makes her into a zonah. So basically, someone who had premarital sex would be considered a zonah according to the Torah, according to Rabbi Eliezer. And this must follow that, and that's why they thought maybe she's a pnuya also, and they came to teach you no, not, okay? Oh, so even though in other words, what they were really saying is, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who thinks that is new, still the bat kohen who does this wouldn't get the harsher punishment. She'd just get chenek. Oh, and right, no, the question is, I don't think she would still get chenek. She's just considered a zonah, but she wouldn't get punished by the death penalty. He doesn't think they get the death penalty. Okay, next. Oh, I know Omer Aviha Elalotzi Kol Adam. Now they say maybe the Aviyah isn't used for Gzera Shava. Maybe the Aviyah is used to exclude anybody, to say we're just talking about a bat kohen who sleeps with her father. Then she's going to get streifa. So Elamaini, wait, she doesn't tell me Aviyah. Wait, you're trying to say what the Havamina, right? The suggestion in the braita was only if she sleeps with her father will she get burned. This unique punishment for the bat kohen. My area bat kohen, afilu bat Yisrael nami. Okay, you don't know this yet, but on Daf Ayin Hey, we're going to have this Gzera Shava that we're going to talk about right now. Although I'm not going to go into it because it's a little complicated. I don't want to spend our time in it today. We'll get there soon, within the month. But we basically say that a bat kohen, any woman who sleeps with her father, the punishment is burning. How do we know this? Da'amar Rava, Amarli Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, At Yehena Hena At Yazima Zima. Okay, there's a double Gzera Shava. One pasuk says Hema, about a father sleeping with his daughter. Another pasuk says Hema, which also says Zima. And the pasuk about Sreifa goes to it in a different case. Okay, not the Bat Kohen and this, but a different pasuk about Sreifa says Zima. So we're going to do Hema, Hema, Zima, Zima. From there, we're going to learn that a father gets Sreifa for sleeping with his daughter, and a daughter gets Sreifa for sleeping with her father. And therefore, you can't suggest that this pasuk was telling you get streifa for a bat kohen specifically who sleeps with her father, because every girl who sleeps with her father, every woman who sleeps with her father, or father sleeps with her daughter, is streifa. So that doesn't make any sense. So now the Gemara says, well, maybe, because then we don't even understand what they were suggesting in the braita. You might have thought maybe Avia in the pasuk comes to say, don't accept this Gzera Shava of Rav. And that was all Gzera Shava. Maybe the pasuk saying, Avia, this is only her father, which means a bat kohen with her father would get streifa, but a regular person wouldn't. And to say that Gzera Shava is all wrong. But mitigali rachmana bebat kohen below bebat Yisrael, because the Torah said streifa specifically for a bat kohen, not for a bat Yisrael. So you might have thought to say that, kamash malam, but no. In the end, they say no, because it says she disgraced her father, whether it's her father she slept with, or whether it's any man she slept with, and therefore you can't understand the pasuk that way. But this was again all to understand what the Gemara, what the braita even was suggesting. Bat kohen. Now we're going to deal with this. Bat kohen enu elas sheniset lekohen, niset lelevi leYisrael lekuti lechalal lenatinu lemamzer minayin tabalomar bat ish kohen alpha b'she'ena kohenet. Okay, that was all to tell you. You might have thought only if she's married to a kohen, which we said we didn't even understand what they were thinking. Now we're going to try to figure it out. So they ask exactly that question. Mishum di insabele lahane lav bat kohen. Just because she marries someone, a Levi Yisrael, she's not a bat kohen. Like, of course, she's still the daughter of a kohen. It doesn't change her lineage. Vitu midi kohen lekohen ktiv, and it never says on the pasuk a bat kohen who's married to a kohen. Never says that. So why would you even thought this? So they say, and we're gonna divide them into two. There's the Levi in Israel in one category, and there's all the psulim in the second category, right? All those who caused her to really lose her status of being able to ever eat truma. So we're going to start with that because that's a little easier. Sakadat hakamina, you would have thought ki techel is not amarachmana. Now, what is ki techel? When she disgraces herself through znut. It's only someone who disgraces herself now. This woman already disgraced herself before. This one, she's already disgraced, right? And how do we know this? Okay, this is basically when a woman who's a bat kohen marries anyone who's not a kohen, she can no longer eat truma. Now, it's not true forever, right? It's just temporarily while she's married. But they darshan, kevan shenivala lepasula psala. Once she has relations with someone who she's not allowed to, which is that kuti, mutim, mamzer, and halal, right? Even though, again, she's not, the halal is a little different because it's not like she's forbidden to, but it does make her not able to marry a kohen. Again, psala. At that point, she can never eat truma, she can never this. So you might have thought that those people are not part of this pasuk. Ki techel is note. She only disgraces herself now, not someone who was already disgraced before. Okay, now you can't say the same about a Levi in Israel. A woman who marries them isn't disgraced. But so what are we going to say about them? The Levi Yisrael nami v'shavel beit avia kinu ureha. Right? What happens when the marriage ends? If it ends, right, and she's still alive, then she goes back to her father's house and can eat truma. What do you see from here? But while she's still married to them, she can't. So that means maybe, like I said about myself, right? I have nothing about me that's really about kohen at this point. So maybe I shouldn't get the streifa penalty. Emaloti don't be streifa. You might have thought she doesn't get streifa. She's only streifa when she marries a kohen and is within the kohen world. Kamash malan, no. But again, it can teach you bat ish kohen, the daughter of a man who's a kohen, and that proves it. Udilo ke Rabbi Meir. And by the way, this is all not like Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir disagrees with the conclusion of the braita, as we're going to see right now, Ditanya. Because he's going to basically say anyone who marries a psul, okay, one of those people that she's not, and she can no longer marry a kohen anymore, she doesn't get streifa. Okay, he has a unique opinion here. Ba kohen, and this is his opinion. A ba kohen sheniset li Yisrael v'achlat truma. Here's a different situation. But if she marries a Yisrael and she eats truma, okay, now truma for her, maybe this is like the same thing about someone who's mechalel Shabbat, how chilul Shabbat maybe isn't as terrible for them. So, right, or at least not going to require a higher punishment of death. And as we're still saying, someone who's mechalel Shabbat and then, right, who's allowed to, doesn't mean they can desecrate Shabbat when they're not. But it's a little different for them. So now they say, if she marries a Yisrael and she eats truma, maybe it's not the same thing for her as it is for someone else who eats truma, because for her, truma was part of what she grew up with. She's still a bat kohen. So there's actually a small difference in halacha. Mishalemet et hakeren ve'ena mishalemet et chomesh. She pays the amount she ate. That's what you have to do for truma. Also, she has to return it to the kohen. Also, now anyone else would have to pay a chomesh, an additional fifth, which really ends up a quarter. If you remember all those sugyas, but I'm not going back there. But she doesn't. She doesn't have to add that extra chomesh payment. Umitata b'sreifa. So there's certain elements that she's still considered a bat kohen. But niseit lecha min hapsulim. But if she marries out, so to speak, then mishalemet keren b'chomesh umitata b'chenek. Then she has to pay the keren, she has to pay the chomesh, and she's treated like a regular Yisrael woman, and her death is chenek. Okay? She gets regular strangulation, she doesn't get burned. So she really is on the outside, and that's divrei Rabbi Meir. Chachamim, which we already know, zov v'zov mishamot keren v'chomesh umitatam b'sreifa. He says, all the bat kohens, okay, now I learned, by the way, there's a new halacha about a bat kohen that's still relevant to me, which is if I steal truma and eat it, right, or I'm in my parents' house and they're eating truma and I eat it, I don't actually have to pay the chomesh. I do have to pay the value of it, but I don't have to pay the chomesh. And again, my death would be streifa. So there's two elements that are still relevant. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Okay, now we're going to get to the complicated sugya, and for this I'm going to pull up the study guide. Okay, here we go. Actually didn't manage to finish up the study guide for the first half, but if I manage to do it, I'll upload it later. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, et avia b'sreifa ve'et chamia b'skila. So, my et avia ve'et chamia. What is the avia and what is the chamia? And what are we talking about? So, again, father is father, avia, and chamia is father-in-law. So, ilema et avia me avia. Now, et avia could mean if she sleeps with her father. If you want to say if she sleeps with her father is, right, sreifa, which we know is to be the case, so maybe yes, and et chamia, mechamia, which means she sleeps with her father-in-law, which, by the way, anyone who sleeps with their father-in-law, the punishment is stoning. Okay, we're going to get to that also later. Also on Daf Ayin Hey, I believe. My area bat kohen, afilu ba'Yisrael nami, bito b'sreifa v'kalato b'skila. But this is the classic law for anybody. Every woman who sleeps with her father, we just learned, hena, hena, zima, zima, that teaches you, any woman who sleeps with her father, both he and she get streifa. And any woman who sleeps with her father-in-law, which is the same thing as kalato, that means he sleeps with his daughter-in-law, it's all the one and the same, gets stoned. So that wouldn't be what Rabbi Eliezer is saying about the bat kohen, because that's true about everyone. So rejection number one. Second suggestion. These are both, the first two suggestions are rejected off the bat. Ela et avia, and they're not mentioned in anyone's name. That's why I call them here Hatzah 1, Hatzah 2. Okay, we're going to go the first suggestion, second suggestion, why they're rejected. Then we're going to go through, well, sorry, that's not what I wanted to do. We're going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4 more opinions. Okay, and you see that all are rejected except really the last one, although in the end, we're going to go back and kind of reinstate one of them. So, Ela et avia bireshut avia, et chamia bireshut chamia. Now, when is a woman in her father's domain? When she's betrothed. When is a woman in her father-in-law's domain? When she's married. So basically, et avia means when she's betrothed, and et chamia means when she's married. Now, we already know that we made these distinctions as to what her punishment is. So now we have to do is figure out who this goes like, okay? And let's go back to our big machloket. A bat kohen, according to Tanakama, if she's betrothed, she gets stoned. If she's married, she gets streifa. According to Rabbi Shimon, she gets streifa across the board. So if you already are quick to think, you already see that none of this matches. Because what did we say? Et avia bisreifa. That means when she's betrothed, she gets streifa, not skila. And Tanakama says skila. And if she's married, she gets streifa. And here it says et chamia, when she's married, she gets skila. So it's the reverse. So let's go through. And if it's Rabbi Shimon, streifa across the board, not streifa and skila. So this doesn't match either of the two opinions. So let's go say that. Kiman, they say, who does this go like? This weird approach then. Ika Rabbanan, if it's like the rabbis, ha'amri nisui yatzat l'streifa v'lo arusa. Again, the married one is the one who gets streifa, not the betrothed one, and this would be the betrothed one. Ika Rabbi Shimon ha'amar achat arusa ha'nesua b'streifa. If it's Rabbi Shimon, he said both get streifa. And Ika Rabbi Yishmael, which I mentioned, we're going to see this opinion now of Rabbi Yishmael, he says, now, this starts to work because he says, ha'amar arusa yatzat l'streifa v'lo nesua, but et chamiach cheneku. He basically says when the pasuk of bat kohen is only when she's betrothed, and that works perfectly with et avia b'sreifa. What's the problem, though? He thinks that a regular married woman who's a bat kohen just gets chenek like everybody else. So et chamia, when she's married, isn't beskila, it's bechenek. So it doesn't match the rabbis. It doesn't match Rabbi Shimon. It doesn't match Rabbi Yishmael. Okay, so those are the two that the Gemara already from the get-go knew they were going to reject because they were introduced as ilema. If you're going to say this, have a retort. If you're going to say this, have a retort. So now we start with answers. And with all these answers, we're going to basically, someone else is going to come along and reject, and that same person is going to bring an alternative. Okay, the first one is the most complicated. Shalach Ravin Mishmei Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. So Ravin sends in the name of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, and I want you to remember this because in the end, they're going to come back and say, someone's going to come and say, he's got it all right. Okay, even though it seems not the one I would have thought is the right one. Kachi hatza'ashal Mishnah. He says, this is the way I suggest reading this braita. Okay, he calls it a Mishnah, but Mishnah braita could be interchangeable. This is the way I suggest reading it. La'olam ki Rabbanan. It matches the rabbi's position, which again, when she's betrothed, she gets stoned. When she's married, she gets burned. Hachi kamar. Now, how do we read that into the words? Well, the problem is, right, the words were flipped. Et avia should, right, sounded like when she is married to her father. So how are we going to say this? Well, when it says et avia b'sreifa, this is how he reads it. Kol shehi lemata mimitat aviha, anyone who's less than when she does it with her father. Okay, what does this mean? Umayni, who is this? Nisua ba Israel. First, we have to start with a regular married woman, not a bako. A nisua ba Israel. The ilu ba. Now we're going to explain what it means. Lemata mimitat avia. Nisua ba Israel b'chenek. Hacha b'mitat avia b'sreifa. A regular ba Israel who's married, what happens? When she sleeps with a regular man, she gets chenek. If she sleeps with her father, it's more severe. So what it means, lemata me'avia, it means in a case, meaning when a woman is married, her punishment for another man is less than her punishment for sleeping with her father. Okay, that's, again, father, streifa, husband, any other man, strangulation. So that, okay, hacha, in our case then, in other words, copy that, move over now to that same situation, meaning a married woman, which is basically what we want to do. We want to get to et avia means married woman. So what is married woman? It's et avia when in a parallel case, the death penalty for sleeping with another man would be less than the father, which means married woman. In the bat kohen case, hacha b'mitat avia b'sreifa. In this case, she's going to get the death penalty that normally a woman gets when she sleeps with her father, a regular woman, which is streifa. That's the punishment she's going to get as a bat kohen. Again, really meaning in the case where she's married. Because what's unique about the case that she's married, that in a regular woman, there's it's a less severe punishment than what the father would have got, when she would have gotten if she had slept with the father. Okay, it's very convoluted, I know. Kol shehi lemala mimitat avia. Now we have to go to the other side. What does et chamia mean? If she's lemala mimitat avia, meaning a woman who normally sleeps with her father is going to get burned. What if she's betrothed? Then that ups it one to skila. So, umayniu arusa bat Yisrael, right? So that's a case where she's lamala. And what they're really trying to do is to be creative in how to get from et avia, which we thought meant while she's in the domain of her father, to marriage and not betrothal. And et chamia, we want to get to betrothal and not to marriage. So what do we say? We say, well, in a case of betrothal, an arusa bat Yisrael actually gets a less severe punishment than she would if it was her father. Because her father, she gets sreifa. If she's betrothed and sleeps with someone, she gets skila. So ilu arusa bat Yisrael ba'alma b'skila. So therefore, in the parallel case of a betrothed woman, when she's a bat kohen, hacha b'mitat chamia b'skila, she gets the punishment that a woman gets when she sleeps with her father-in-law, which is stoning. Okay, very convoluted way of getting there. Again, you have to just think about what their motivation was. The motivation was to get to what they assume to be true, which is et avia b'sreifa is obviously talking about when she's, right, this is the rabbi's position, when she's married. And et chamia, we want to get to when she's betrothed. So if we can push it into the word somehow, which they did in a bit of a complicated manner, it works. Matkefla Rabbi Yirmiyah, but of course Rabbi Yirmiyah comes in and questions. This is not necessarily the classic Rabbi Yirmiyah, but obviously someone was going to question this. Midi lamala lamata katani? That's not what it said. It didn't say avia means lamata me avia and lamala me avia. It never said, right? It never said any of that. I don't know where you got this from, and therefore Rabbi Yirmiyah rejects that explanation. Ela Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah comes and says, turning out Amud Bet, Laolam ki Rabbi Yishmael. We didn't meet Rabbi Yishmael yet. Rabbi Yishmael has this opinion. I mean, we kind of mentioned it, that, and that's why after we finish this whole section, we're going to go back and understand where does Rabbi Yishmael say this, that the betrothed woman gets sreifa. Now you can see why this is the preferred option, because et avia b'sreifa means when she's married to her father, when she's betrothed in the domain of her father still, because the betrothed women were still in their father's house, she would get streifa. So Rabbi Yishmael would be a good way to go. What was the problem, though? When she's married, according to Rabbi Yishmael, she gets chenek, strangulation. So that doesn't match et chamia b'skila. So what's he going to say? Hachi kamar. Et avia bereshut avia b'sreifa. That works perfectly. Et chamiha me chamiha b'skila. V'chol adam b'chenek. What does et chamia mean? If she's married, what's the rule? According to Rabbi Yishmael, if she's married, she gets chenek. But what if she's married, this bat kohen, and she sleeps with her father-in-law? What's she going to get? Chenek. Skila, like everybody. So that's what it means here. So now it's a little bit confusing, and they're going to question this right away, because he's basically saying et avia means in the domain of her father. Et chamia means if she sleeps with her father-in-law. So if she sleeps with her father-in-law, she'll get stoned. If she sleeps with anyone else while she's betrothed, she'll get streifa. And the case he didn't mention was if she's married and sleeps with anybody else other than her father-in-law and any other arayot that might have a different punishment, then she'll just get chenek. Okay? So I'm a Rava, my shna. He says, how could you say that et avia and et chamia have totally different interpretations? In other words, o idi v'idi mamash. Either you mean et avia means she slept with her father, and et chamia means she slept with her father-in-law. O idi v'idi reshut, or et avia means she's in her father's domain, meaning betrothed. Et chamia means she's in her father-in-law's domain, meaning married. But, both mean this, right? They have to be parallel here. You're saying et avia means domain, reshut, and et chamia means slept with her father-in-law. You can't do that split here. It doesn't make any sense. So Rava rejects this interpretation. Ela amar Rava. Sorry, I don't know why my computer keeps doing this. Ela amar Rava. Laolam ke Rabbi Shimon. V'kasavar. Okay, remember Rabbi Shimon? Okay, we're at second to last answer here. Now, Rabbi Shimon says streifa across the board. Okay, so how are we going to explain this then? Well, good question. Okay, let's just read it like this. Kasavar Rabbi Eliezer nisua ka'arusa. Okay, a married woman is like a betrothed woman. Ma arusa. Now, what he's basically saying is, we said, remember Rabbi Shimon says nisua and arusa are the same. So Rabbi Eliezer says like this. What do you mean they're the same? They're the same that had darga maskinala. Now, if you hold like Rabbi Shimon holds, now what they're talking about Rabbi Shimon here, they're not necessarily talking about Rabbi Shimon of streifa, right? They both are Arusa and both Nisua get streifa. What he's saying is the order of the deaths. Remember, it's streifa, skila, chenek, hereg. So now, let's take an Arusa. Marusa chad darga maskinala miskila l'streifa. Let's take a betrothed woman. What happens with a betrothed woman? Betrothed woman gets streifa if she's a bat kohen, and if she's not a bat kohen, she gets skila. How many levels between them? Just one. It's one jump up. You jump up in a betrothed woman. From the average woman gets skila, the bat kohen gets streifa, one more severe. Well, just like that. And what does it mean? Nisua is like arusa. Well, af nisua chad darga maskinala michenek l'skila. So the married bat kohen is going to jump up one level from chenek, which the average person gets. And what's the one above chenek according to Rabbi Shimon? Skila, stoning. So basically that's how we're going to get to, okay, and now we're going to say, et avia means when she's betrothed. Et chamia means when she's married. So when she's betrothed, she ups a level from skila streifa. When she's married, she ups a level from chenek to skila. That sounds great, except what? The obvious. This was all according to Rabbi Shimon. because of his order of the deaths. But what does Rabbi Shimon say? Both the married and the betrothed get streifa, which means you can't say et chamia means when she's in her father-in-law's domain because she's married, she gets stoned because we're going to up her a level from everyone else, because that's not what Rabbi Shimon says. Rabbi Shimon says they both get streifa, the Yarusa and the Nesua. So you can't read this according to Rabbi Shimon, which you already knew from the beginning. A little bit strange to suggest that. Ella Amar Ravina, I'm assuming that he thought anyway. I mean, obviously, Rabbi Hanina didn't like that. But I'm guessing that Rava thought like Rabbi Shimon, but not like Rabbi Shimon, right? Like Rabbi Shimon in the sense that Arusa and Nisur are similar, but not like it that we're jumping them up a level, and not that they both get streifa. Except that hard to say that on Rabbi Shimon because he specifically says that's not the case. Ela Amar Ravina, La'olam Rabbanan. So now Ravina has the simplest answer. Okay, if this was complicated until now, at least we're starting to get to the simple stuff today, which is if we had this problem that et avia means when she's in the domain of her father, meaning betrothed, she gets streifa, and when she's in her father-in-law's domain, married, she gets skila, and we know it's the reverse. So ipuch. Okay, let's just flip it. So Ravina says, let's just say this holds like the rabbis and flip the shitot. Et avia b'skila ve'et chamia b'sreifa, and just change the words. And then it all fits perfectly. B'haidika amar et avia. Now they have to answer the following question, which is, why did they say avia then? Why did they mention, why did they just say arusa nesua? That would have been much simpler, right? Why did they use that language? To which they answer, sircha ba'alma nakat. Okay, Rashi explains what does that mean? In other words, they dragged it from the language of the pasuk. Remember, the pasuk talked about et avia mechalelet, and because avia was in the pasuk, they used the language et avia versus et chamia. Okay, whether that's a strong answer or not, can't say, but in the end, we have the last answer, which basically says flip. Now, which is always, on the one hand, a good answer. On the other hand, that's not what it said, and it's always a bit of a complicated answer, and usually you only say it when you're stuck and you have no choice, which it sounded like he was. So before we get to Rabbi Yishmael, we have one small thing to do, which is Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabbi Ravua, Amar Rav. So now they pass down the name of Rav, halacha kedishalach Rabbanit Michelle Farber Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. And the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, like Ravin brought from Israel, and the name of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina was a Tana from Israel, who had said that lemala lamata, that very complicated one. So now Rav Yosef has a bit of a problem with this, not because it was so complicated, but Rav Yosef says, Hilchata l'Mashiach, why are you telling us the halacha for the times of the Mashiach? Like, why don't we just leave this for the Mashiach to figure out what Rabbi Eliezer meant? Now, first of all, Rabbi Eliezer, why is this not relevant? First of all, we don't even have Mito Beitin anymore. Secondly, nobody really disagrees with the rabbis. All they're trying to figure out is what did Rabbi Eliezer say? So it actually has zero relevance, even if we did have a court open nowadays, okay, that was killing people. So he just doesn't understand why he's saying that. To which Amar le Abaye el me'ata shchita kodshim lo litnei. So what? We shouldn't learn about shchita. Okay, we're going to spend many, many months on zvachim and menachot and lots of other masechtot that all have to do with korbanot. What, are we not supposed to learn those? Ella, very famous, drosh v'kabel sachar, right? We're supposed to learn them in order to get rewarded for learning Torah. Hachanami drosh v'kabel sachar. Okay, which could be interpreted, it's not all about the reward. The idea is there's a lot to learn just from learning Torah, whether it's practical or not. So why are you giving me why are you giving him problems with it? That Rav said this. To which he explains, Abai is going to Rav Yosef and saying, oh, why are you asking such a question on Rav? To which Rav Yosef says, Hachi kamri. No, what I meant to say, the reason why I asked it is, Hilchatalamali, sugya deshmatin halacha kama. This wasn't a halachic sugya. I didn't like the wording they used in the name of Rav. They said that Rav said the halacha is like. This isn't the case what the halacha is like. This is not halacha. This is a parshanut. I have no problem. We can say, I prefer this parshanut, but that's not what he said. I was having trouble with the way he worded it. Okay, from here, we're going to move on to Rabbi Yishmael, and we're going to get into a big machlok between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. We're not even going to finish the whole thing today. My Rabbi Yishmael. So what is this opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, who, remember, says the naram, the bat kohen that we're talking about in the pasuk is only a betrothed one? Okay, now, Ditanya. Ubat ish kohen ki techelis not. Here's our braita, long braita. The daughter of a man who's a kohen, when she goes and sleeps with another man, so they assume it's talking about an aram or asad. That's Rabbi Yishmael. To which, again, classic Midrash Halacha, they're going to question this. How do you know she's betrothed? Maybe she's married. Talmud Lamar. Ish. Now, where does he prove it from? Well, he goes to the pasuk about Eshet Ish. Ish asher afet esherei hu mot yuad hanoefa noefa. Goes to the basic case of adultery. Now, hakol hayu b'chlal hanoefa noefa. Here goes his argument. Everyone, right? All women were part of this noefa noefet. But then we have two exceptions to the rule. What are the two exceptions? First exception, Hosea katu bat Yisrael b'skila. If you're betrothed, there's an exception to the rule, and you're going to get stoned, and also the man. Bat kohen is exception number 2, and she gets burned. As now, mak shotzia katu et bat Yisrael b'skila arusa v'lo nesua. Ak shotzia katu bat kohen l'sreifa arusa v'lo nesua. Here comes his argument. It says, if there's two exceptions to this one pasuk, and one was clearly about an arusa, the other one must also be about an arusa, and therefore we're assuming when the exception came along for the bat kohen, and she's different from everyone else, it must have been the same way the other one was only an arusa. This one's also only an arusa. Okay, second thing Rabbi Yishmael says, and that's our proof basically, for his opinion. Zomemeha uboala bichlav asitem lo kasher zamam. The zomimim of this bat kohen and her husband, and the one, the zomimah of the bat kohen and the man she sleeps with, who, the adulterer, and the man she sleeps with, are all under this asitem lo kasher zaman. They get what they tried to do to the other. Now, Gemara says, what are you talking about? Bo'ala, my kasher zaman ika. Kasher zaman is for witnesses, not the person who did the sin. What are you talking about? Ela zomimah bichlal mitap bo'ala. This is just telling us a law we already know, which is the zomimim get the punishment of the bo'el and not her. Mishum shene'emal, we've seen this a bunch of times already. Asitem lo kasher zamam laso la'achiv v'lo la'achoto. Okay, to the brother, not the sister, right? Meaning to the man, not the woman. So they're going to get the punishment of the man. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. Comes Rabbi Akiva now to argue on the first halacha. Rabbi Akiva omer, achat ha'usa v'achat nesua yatzat l'sreifa. What do you mean? Both the arusa and both the nesua, you see the Rabbi Akiva, or Rabbi Shimon holds like Rabbi Akiva, basically, okay? Both the arusa and the nesua get sreifa. Yachol afilu pnuya. Now he's going to say, there's one included, okay? If you start with arusa, then we're going to also include the nesua, the married. But we're not going to include an unmarried woman at all, right? These are 3 statuses of women: unmarried, betrothed, married. So not the betrothed, not the pnuya. Why not? We already know this. Ne'amar kan avia v'ne'amar lahalan avia ma lahalan znudim zikapal avkan znudim zikarabal. Because of the avia, we're going to learn from the Nahara Morasa that it's only betrothed and married, but not unmarried entirely. It has no connection to a husband. She's not going to get straight. So Amarla Rabbi Yishmael, you can see where this is going. If you're going to learn it from Nahara Morasa, then learn it across the board, just Arusa, and not, right? You're excluding one case, including another. Why are you doing that? So Amarla Rabbi Yishmael, Ila halan Nara v'yarusa avkan Nara v'yarusa. Well, then you should get to the conclusion, if you're doing this Gzera Shava Nara Morasa, by us it's also only if she's an Nara and only if she's betrothed. Amar la Rabbi Akiva Yishmael achi. You ready for the big line? We're almost there. Bat ubat ani doresh. I remember Rabbi Akiva is famous. He darshans vavs in the Torah, right? That's his big thing. Vavs, etz, kabet, et avicha vet imecha. It says ubat kohen in our pasuk. The vav comes to include the additional case of the married woman. Amar lo. Here's the big line. You ready? Rabbi Yishmael says, "V'chi mipnei she'ata doresh bat ubat notzizo l'sreifa." I can't think you make a big deal about vavs, but you're going to burn someone because of a vav? One little letter, that's going to make all the difference. You're going to now take this woman out to be burned when, just because of a drasha? And that's what Din and Daf is all about, this big fight between them, okay? Im mashma lahavi et hanisua, hevi et hapnuya, v'mashma lo tzei et hapnuya, tzei et hanisua. Rabbi Yishmael doesn't like this zigzag. He says either you say vav and vav or vav. Okay, so include everything, include the pnuya also. Or you're going to say gzera shava and exclude everyone in just the Nahara Morasa you should have. So, and then not the married woman. So what does Rabbi Akiva answer? Rabbi Akiva, ahane gzera shava l'mu'ute pnuya, v'ahane batupat l'rabot et hanisua. Rabbi Akiva says, I got the gzera shava to include that one. I got the vav, exclude the unmarried. I got the vav to include the married. Okay, and that's what he says. I got this one, and that's why I exclude and include. Rabbi Yishmael, what was he thinking? Isn't that obvious? That's what Rabbi Akiva said. So Rabbi Yishmael savar mitka amalei bat ubat. Once Rabbi Akiva said bat ubat idarshan, he thought shma mina hadra beim gzeira shava. He thought that was saying instead of the gzeira shava that he was rejecting. First he said the gzeira shava, then he took it back because the bat ubat. Rabbi Yishmael, hai bat ubat my darish bein. Now this is very interesting because Rabbi Yishmael doesn't darshan bavs, but for some reason, maybe because the Gemara knows there's something else, says, what does he do with the bat ubat? He must do something with the vav. So maybe he doesn't think you take someone out to be burned, but you must learn something from it. So what does he learn? Some other braita, we can assume maybe this is Rabbi Yishmael. Talmud lomar bat ubat. A Baal Mum can't work in the temple, a kohen who's a Baal Mum who has a blemish. So maybe his daughters don't get sreifa. Ubat comes to teach, no, as long as she's daughter of a kohen, even if he's blemished, still gets streifa. So then they say, Rabbi Akiva, where does he learn that from? He must learn it also. Well, he learned it from a different pasuk. It says the kohanim are sanctified because they bring my sacrifices, and then it says Bahayu Kodesh. So why do they add this Bahayu Kodesh? It means that even if they don't bring the sacrifices, they're still Doshim, which means their daughters will still get, right, are still disgracing their name. Right, does Rabbi Yishmael learn it from there? And that's our last line for today. That just means they're sanctified. It doesn't necessarily mean their daughters are still going to get sreifa. And that's why he needed the drasha of the vav to teach you, yes, the daughters get sreifa, even if their fathers are balei mumim. So in the end, it's crazy because Rabbi Yishmael even darshans vav and includes someone getting killed who wasn't even going to get killed, right? The bat kohen, whose father's a Baal Mum, was going to get strangulation, and now he's making her get sreifa also. So it's a little interesting that he throws that question at Rabbi Akiva, and in the end, now, he didn't say it himself. They put it in his mouth, so maybe he didn't really think that. But they do put that in there. Raised a lot of questions. So what did we do today? We had that very long braita with 7 cases. A lot of them we tried to figure out was the braita even thinking by these crazy suggestions that they suggested. What was the meaning of those suggestions? What was the basis for those suggestions? And then we had a long discussion how to understand what Rabbi Eliezer says at Tavia B'Sreifa and at Chamia B'Skila. We had 6, I think, interpretations of how to read that. Then we kind of, somebody came, Rav said he preferred one of them. Rabbi Yosef didn't like his language, halacha. This wasn't halacha, which we got into drosh v'kabel sachar and the importance of that. And then we went to understanding Rabbi Yishmael, and we got to this big fight between them about darshaning vavs. And with that, we end for today. And again, like I said, one other summary is this bat kohen, which case the pasuk is talking about. Is it only arusa when she's betrothed? Is it only when she's married, or is it both? And that was the big debate we saw between the 3 different people, the rabbis, Rabbi Shimon, and now Rabbi Yishmael. With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day. Shema b'serot tovot.